Hello, everyone. Welcome to Go Global World. And again, we have a special talk for entrepreneurs, trying to help you guys access the world opportunities. And today, we want to discuss on opportunities in the United States on a legal side. So, the topic for today's talk is US visas for entrepreneurs. And here with me today, I have a U.S. immigration lawyer, Nadia Yakub, who has all possible scenarios that can help you entering the United States legally. So, hi Nadia, how are you? Good to see
Hi,
you.
Daniel. Great to see you.
So I know Nadia for quite some time. We were mentors at Stanford, doing some support for entrepreneurs. Nadia has already spoken on our community a year ago about visas for different types of people entering the States. And today we specifically want to touch on visas for entrepreneurs. And this is the topic is especially interesting because the world nowadays is a little bit in a different shape than it was a month ago because of some media and everybody's having hard time watching what's happening in the world. And we truly want to help. We want to answer your questions, and Nadia prepared a specific presentation right on that. Nadia, please tell about yourself, tell about the topic, and let's get into it.
Thank you, Daniel. So, as Daniel mentioned, I'm a U.S. immigration lawyer. I've been practicing for over 20 years now, and I focus on startups, emerging companies, tech entrepreneurs, investors, and I really enjoy watching my clients grow their businesses in their U.S., actualize their vision. And so I'm going to be talking about, and I'll just go ahead and Daniel, why don't I start with the slides so that you guys can all see what we'll be covering today. What we'll be talking about today is ways for you to come and explore the United States. Just if this is a place where you see that there's a market for your business, do some due diligence. There are some visa categories that would allow you to come in for such exploration. And then I'll talk about working as an international student. If there are people in the audience who want to further their studies in the United States, get a master's maybe or a PhD, you could also have work authorization that could allow you to sponsor to work. Sorry, there was a banner that came across. 1 second, I was reading it. So there's ways for you to start your own company when you study in the United States. Then I'll cover the list of temporary employment-based visas that will help you see if there's a visa that could be a match with your specific business goals. I'll do a quick slide on how to get a green card to the United States, the 5 primary pathways. I'll close with some common obstacles to getting your visa, just things to keep in mind, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers. Okay. So the first slide is going to be about visiting the United States on the visitor visa, which is the B1. It's also B2 if you're coming in for leisure. And then there's the ESTA, and that's for nationals of countries that don't need a visa to enter the United States. Daniel's told me a little bit about the countries where a lot of the members are from. And while definitely there's a global membership, there is a concentration of folks from the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe. And for most of those countries, you will need to apply for a visitor visa at the US consulate in order to come into the United States. Okay. Now, when you come in, you're allowed up to 6 months. And there's also the possibility for you to extend your stay in the United States by another 6 months. You cannot work when you come in. And when I say work, it means employed by a US company. You're not even really supposed to be looking for jobs when you come as a business visitor. people do it, but you're not supposed to be doing it. What you are allowed to do is look for business opportunities. So if you have a startup, if you have a company already in your home country, like a family business that you want to grow in the US, that is the perfect visa. Just for the ESTA, if you are a national of a country where your visa waived, then you can come in for 90 days, and that's a 90-day maximum. And then you have to go back to your home country. Okay, so that's coming in as a business visitor, and it's a great way to get your first taste of whether the U.S. is a place where you want to grow your business or invest. Okay, so the next slide is about studying in the US. If you're going to study in the US, which is a great way for you to grow your network in the US, to really understand the culture here. Daniel was a student in the United States. You get a visa called an F1. And on the F1 student visa, you have access to 3 types of work authorization. Now, you don't get it immediately upon starting your studies unless there's financial hardship, but you do get work authorization after you complete your studies, or maybe after the first academic year in the summer. So this is, there's 3 kinds. One is called curricular practical training, and that could be something where, let's say you're doing a master's in computer science, and then you get CPT, curricular practical training, to maybe do an internship for during the school year, so part-time. You can get paid on CPT. And then when you graduate, when you finish your studies, you get something called optional practical training, which is 12 months of work authorization. And so basically you can work for 12 months, you can volunteer, you can start your own company, you can be an independent contractor, you can get employed by a company, whatever you want, 12 months. And it's got to be related to what you study, right? So if you've studied computer science, they probably don't want you driving an Uber, right, for that year. I mean, again, do people do it? Yes, they're not supposed to. So that's OPT. Now, if you study a STEM field, STEM is science, technology, engineering, and math. If you study a STEM field, then you get an extra 2 years of work authorization. Okay. And that's fantastic. So if you do a 1-year master's, or let's say an 18-month master's program in engineering, you're eligible for 3 years of work authorization. Now, the STEM OPT extension of 24 months is a little narrower. You actually need to be employed by a company. So you can't be, volunteering or an intern or, freelancing. You need to be employed by a company, but it could be a company that you start. So you would need a partner, and I'm getting really specific here. It's not as straightforward as the OPT, but it is what a lot of my founders do, which is they come here, they get their master's in computer science, they get their OPT, they build the company, and then they have 2 more years on STEM OPT. So they have 3 years to really grow that business that they've founded. Okay. Now I'm going to jump into the most common temporary employment-based visas. I'm going to cover these for you with the angle of, could you use this to start your own business? Could you use this to co-found a company? And I'll explain the possibilities with each visa category. Okay. So the most common visa category for working in the United States. So this is as an employee. Now, I know a lot of you are interested in starting your own businesses, but also if you want to go work for a small startup in the United States, just to get that experience, the most common visa is the H-1B visa. And it's H-1B for high-skilled workers. Okay, so what does that mean? What it means is that the position should require at least a bachelor's degree. And that's how the US immigration law sees that a position is highly skilled, if you need at least a bachelor's degree to do the work. The other three requirements are that you must be employed by the company. So you can't just be a freelancer, or you can't be your own boss. Like, it can't just be you starting your own company. You have to have other people in the picture, but you have to be employed by a company. And then there's a wage requirement, a salary requirement, and I'll explain that in a following slide. And then there are significant government filing fees that you have to pay if you want this visa. So now, talking about the wage requirement, if you want to get an H-1B, and let's say you want to go work for a startup or an emerging company, or let's say even if you want to go work for Google or Apple, if they want to sponsor you for an H-1B, they have to pay you the required salary for that role. How is that defined? That's defined by the area in which you will work, so geographic area, and the occupation, okay? And then it's also, they look at, well, does this company have other people in this role? What do they pay those people? And, is it at least as high as the prevailing wage? If it's even higher, then they have to pay you that. So prevailing wage, just to go back, is set by the Department of Labor. The Department of Labor has an online wage library. There's a hyperlink to it, and Daniel will share the slides with those of you who've attended the presentation after. And there's an online wage library, and it asks you the state, the county you're going to work in, what kind of occupation you'll be in, and it'll tell you 4 levels of salary, and you have to meet level 1 at least. Okay, so that's the prevailing wage. But let's say you go to work for a company where, as a software engineer, and they actually pay above the prevailing wage. This is very common at Amazon, for example, or Apple, Facebook, Google. All those companies pay way above market. If that's the case, they need to pay you that amount as well. Just because you're a foreign national doesn't mean they don't have to pay you the same they pay the US workers. So it's either the actual wage or prevailing wage. Now, I have one client who, it's an architecture firm, and they just don't pay well. And so the prevailing wage was actually higher than what they pay all their architects. And so it was very delicate, but they had to pay these foreign national architects the prevailing wage. And so then they had to kind of give all their employees a raise, because if these students from China getting their master's in architecture are suddenly making more, it was creating some problems on in the company. So they raised the salary. So that's the wage requirements. The next requirement is that you have to be employed by a company. So you can't just start your own firm and employ yourself and sponsor, and sponsor yourself for an H-1B. It could be a company that you are partly an owner of, but you can't be a controlling shareholder. Okay, so if you do want to start your own company in the United States and then try to get an H-1B visa to work in the United States for your company, you're going to have an ownership interest in the company that is not controlling. Okay, what does that mean? So it means that you can't have more than 50%. And even if you have 50%, you probably want to have less. So you want to have 30 or 40 at the most, but we have to show, look, he's an employee of this company. He's not running the show, or she's not in charge, even though she has ownership interest. She's got a board, she's got a co-founder, there's a CEO. So it is possible, but it's not where you can just go in and say, okay, I'm going to start this company in the US and I'm going to sponsor myself for this H-1B visa. It's probably not the right visa if you just want to be the owner of the company. Okay. However, if you're going to go work for, if you want to go work for a startup or a company in the US, this is probably a good visa for that, as long as they hire you as an employee, not as a freelancer, not from a placement agency. Okay. So that's what they want to see. They want to see that you're a real employee of this company. And then the next requirement is these pretty substantial government filing fees that an employer must pay if they want to hire a foreign national worker to fill this position. And it's the employer that has to pay it. Now, you may say to the employer, I'll cover some of it. You're not supposed to do that. People do it, but you're not supposed to. The employer actually signs a form when they're filing the petition saying, we covered all the fees. Okay. So what are those fees? They're pretty substantial. There's 460 is a base fee. Then there's a $500 fee for fraud investigations, which the USCIS does, Immigration Service does. They're looking for fees to fund their investigations. And then there's a fee of either $750 or $1,500, depending on how big the company is. So if the company has 26 or more employees, it's $1,500. And then if you want a decision in 15 calendar days, not 15 business, 15 calendar days, that's pretty fast. That's 2 weeks. If you want a decision in 2 weeks, it's an extra $2,500. Otherwise, the regular processing times can be 3 to 6 months. Now, if you divide $2,500 over 3 to 6 months, it's probably worth it to just pay $2,500 and get that decision in 15 days and have the peace of mind and the visibility on your options faster, right? So those are the fees. So total 1,710 to 2,000, almost 500 in government filing fees. Now, the real issue with the H-1B visa is not just the salary, is not just the role, your employee roles, not the degree requirement. Okay, I mean, that's, all this is pretty serious stuff to show. But the real issue with the H-1B visa is that there's an annual limit that the government can give every year of H-1B visas. And that limit is actually quite low. When I first started practicing 20 years ago, that limit was 195,000. So almost 200,000 visas the government could give for H-1B. And that was, 20 years ago. Now, fast forward 20 years, and they've actually reduced it since that time because of the September 11th, 2001 terrorist attacks. And then in 2008 with the financial crisis, they've kept the numbers low. And so now the numbers are about 65,000. Okay. And actually it's even lower because 6,800 are for nationals of Singapore and Chile. So it's really about 58,000 per year can be given. And then if you've studied in the US and have a US master's, not US undergrad, and not a master's from another country, but if you got a US master's degree, they give an extra 20,000 H-1B visas to US master's graduates. Okay, I have a link to the biggest filers, so it would be interesting for you to see. You won't be surprised that some of the biggest filers are Amazon, Apple, Google, General Electric, but the biggest filers are actually Indian consulting firms like Tata, Wipro, Cognizant, Infosys. They are the biggest users of the H-1B visa program, and they file 10 to 20,000 H-1Bs, in the annual lottery. So the lottery, what is that? Basically, because there's an annual limit to the number of visas available, the government runs a lottery once a year in March. Okay. So, and then what happens is it announces the results at the end of March. So in March, you have to have an employer who will register you in the lottery. You cannot register yourself. You need an employer to register you for an H-1B visa. And and I'll explain all that in a minute. But before I jump into that, I do want to tell you that not all employers have to go through the lottery. you could work for an employer that is, let's say you go to work for a research organization or a lab that's affiliated with a university. You go to work at a university. So these kinds of organizations don't have to worry about the lottery. So I know, again, I'm talking to mostly entrepreneurs, but to the extent there's a research R&D side to you and you want to go work at a lab or research organization in the US, then you could probably qualify for the H-1B and you don't have to worry about the lottery. Okay. And also, I'm going to tell you, once you get into the United States on the H-1B visa, let's say you've been selected and you get the H-1B visa, once you come to the United States, you can change employers. You don't have to go through the lottery again, and you can extend your H-1B time and you don't have to go through the lottery again. Okay, so the lottery is just that first time to get that visa. So let me tell you a little bit about how that lottery works. Employers and their lawyers, if you usually will want a lawyer helping you with this, have to set up an account with my USCIS. And USCIS is for United States Citizenship and Immigration Services. Okay, USCIS. And your employer has to set up an account with my USCIS. And then there's a 2-week window in March where they will register you. And the USCIS announces every year when that 2-week window in March will be. It sort of shifts. Sometimes it's March 1 to March 18. Sometimes it's March 7 to March 24, something like that. So there's a 2-week window, and they'll announce it and let us know, okay, here's when you're going to be able to submit your registrations. During that 2-week registration window, a registration is submitted. It's very simple. It doesn't ask for a lot of analysis. It's really just who you are. Do you have a U.S. master's degree? And do you have a valid passport? It's a very simple form. The reason you want a lawyer helping you with this is to make sure that if you're selected, you would qualify for the H-1B visa, right? And then basically at the end of March, they started notifying us. So it's pretty exciting. We started getting these email notifications from USCIS. This person got selected. This person got selected. And then we have 90 days starting on April 1 to June 30th. We have 90 days to file the petition. And then USCIS spends the summer adjudicating them. And then you can start on October 1. Okay. So that's kind of the timeline. And I realize for a lot of startups, it's like, my God, 6 months out. I don't know what's going to be happening in 6 months, right? Like March to October. This process requires a lot of planning, thinking ahead. So you're probably going to need to find employers that are willing to think ahead like this. The good news is if they file it and you're selected and then they decide, we don't have a need for this, or we don't have the bandwidth to do this, it's okay. Then you just don't act on the registration. In fact, USCIS has to run lotteries again throughout the year because so many employers do not act on those registrations that are selected. So last year, there were about 380,000 registrations submitted. Remember, we have basically around just under 80,000 H-1Bs can be granted between the 58 for everyone other than U.S. masters, and then you have the 20,000 for U.S. masters. So we're talking about about 80,000 because we subtract out for Singapore and Chile. And they got 380,000 registrations. They ran the lottery. Not everyone filed a petition that was selected at the end of March last year. So then in July, they had extra visas available. So they went back to that pool of registrations from March, selected more. And then, if you can believe it, all those employers didn't act on the registrations, So they went and selected more in November. So if you're not selected the first time in March, you could be selected again in the summer or in the autumn, but you cannot submit registrations after that March window. So it's really important, if you are interested in this option, that you find an employer in that March area to sponsor you and register you. Okay, so that is the H1, how the H1B lottery works. Moving on, I wanted to tell you just one thing. People always ask me, like, how can I, is this lottery really random? Is there a way to improve my chances? Does the government pick certain kinds of positions or certain kinds of employers? And one thing, the reality is it is truly random. The American Immigration Lawyers Association actually sued the US government to find out, how are you selecting? I mean, are you truly random? And they said, we don't need to tell you, but you should trust that it's random. Okay. But one thing that under the Trump administration, one thing they had proposed, which has been withdrawn, but they did propose that, okay, we'll pick the people who are being offered the highest salaries. So by occupation, they would organize all the registrations by salary. They would organize all the registrations by occupation and then look at who was getting offered the highest salary in every occupation and pick those. This was, of course, considered extremely classist, and it was challenged in court. And, because you could also be just a junior physician or a junior lawyer and you just don't make a lot of money and you've just graduated, but it's still a highly skilled job. And so that's what a lot of universities fought this. And so then the government said, fine, we won't do it. So they withdrew that. So there is no way of increasing your chances of selection. It's apparently totally random. Okay. So that's the H-1B. Let's see here. Oh, sorry. How much can you work? I just want to tell you, you can work part-time. You can work full-time, of course, but you don't have to. You can work part-time. Probably 20 hours a week is the minimum. And I give you this option in case you're going to go work for a company that's a startup or emerging company and is saying, I can't pay you that full prevailing wage. So you can say, okay, well, you know what? How about you hire me on a part-time basis? And so you could do that. And then you can also work for more than one employer because you need to have authorization to work for whoever you're going to work for. You can't just work for someone. Once you come in on the H-1B, you can't go work for someone else without authorization. Okay. So what you could do is, let's say you're working part-time for one employer, you can go work full-time for another employer. Because your work is tied to a sponsoring employer. Okay. Insofar as family and life planning, you can stay here for up to 6 years on the H-1B. You can extend beyond that time if you are being sponsored for permanent residence by your employer. So generally, I encourage my clients to start having that discussion, start pushing for that discussion at the halfway mark. So that's year 3 of your H-1B time, but definitely, in the fight for talent, Microsoft, Apple, Google, all these companies are starting green card sponsorship very early. So you probably won't even need to use your full 6 years and you'll probably already, be in line for your green card. Now your spouses can come and your children under 21 can come with you on the H-4 status. But the very unfortunate thing about the H-1B visa category is that the spouses don't get to work. So what ends up happening, and this is something we've been pushing for a long time, policymakers have been saying, if you want to attract the best talent, you need to let these high-skilled workers' spouses work, because most very educated, high-skilled workers are married to other high-skilled workers or very educated people. And so, they want to work too. And for certain parts of America, you need 2 incomes, right? So for a lot of reasons, policymakers have been arguing you should give them work authorization. So far, Congress hasn't listened. So the spouses cannot work until the H-1B worker has a green card, is in line for the green card. At certain stage, the spouse will get work authorization. Okay, so what do these spouses do? They work, they study, they develop their own network and try to and then try to find a new, their own employer to sponsor them. Okay, let's see here. So now I'm going to move on. I've covered the H, and I know that's like almost half an hour, and I know I don't have a lot of time, but I'm going to kind of try and zip through. But the H is the most common visa category. And so it may not be the ideal visa category for you to found your own company by yourself. But if you have a co-founder, if you've got people you want to found it with, and there's ways to make it work. Let me tell you about this visa. This is if you want to start, let's say you have a business or you work for a company that is, outside the US, and you want to open an office in the US, or you want to come to the US office to work. So it's called an L1 visa, and it's for intra-company transferees. So it's got to be an international company, okay? So if you're working for Microsoft in Armenia, you could transfer to the United States on an L1 visa. Now, in order to qualify for the transfer, you need to have worked for the company overseas. Well, when I say overseas, outside the US, for at least 1 year. Okay. And any time you spend in the US is counted against that 1 year. And I say that because a lot of people will say, okay, well, I'm going to go work for this company in, let's just say London, but I'm going to be visiting the US on the business visitor visa. You can do that, but that time is taken away from your 1 year requirement. Okay. So you have to spend 1 year for the company at an overseas office. So you can't just be a freelancer in, let's say, in, Estonia. You have to work for a US company's international office in Estonia or Russia. And then you also have to be coming to work in a particular capacity, either as an executive, a manager, or a specialized knowledge worker. Okay. Now, let's say you're working for a company in, let's just say, in Uzbekistan, and you say, you know what, we really want to go to the US. We want to open a US office. You could do that too. Once you've worked for that company in Uzbekistan for a year, and then you want to set up a new office, a legally related office in the US, you can do it. You have to come in as an executive, manager, or specialized knowledge worker, and it's called a new office L. Okay, so that's a really good option for those of you, really entrepreneurial. I'll tell you, I'm originally from Pakistan, and we have a lot of companies. It's actually interesting. It'll be around textile, rice mills, just a sales office in the US for rugs and spices, right? But you'll have the office in Pakistan, the main family business, and then they'll have a US operation, and then you'll move people to oversee their US operations. Okay. So that's the L1. It's a great visa category for those of you who are thinking about taking your current business or taking your current company where you work into the US. Just some nuts and bolts. There's about $1,000 in government filing fees. And then if you want a decision in 2 weeks, as opposed to waiting 3 to 6 months, then you can pay the $2,500. Okay. There are time limits on how long you can live and work in the US on this visa. It's 5 years if you are a specialized knowledge worker, and it's 7 years if you want to work as an executive or manager. Now, I just want to let you know that there is a green card for international managers. So what a lot of my clients do is that they'll be working in the US on the L1A, which is for an international manager. And then maybe around year 5, they'll apply for their green cards as an international manager. Okay. And then there is the good news, work authorization available to your spouses, not children, but your spouses. Okay. let me tell you about this one. This is a great visa for those younger ones, those younger folks in the audience, maybe young professionals, maybe like a junior professional or just a very recent graduate. There's a J1 visa for trainees and interns to the United States. This is actually, I will tell you, a great substitute to studying in the United States, because studying in the United States is so expensive. And so if you are interested in just working in the US and getting some experience and getting that network, networking in the US, or maybe even getting that small startup experience, you can get a J1 visa. It's supposed to be paid. So it's not unpaid. And it's either 12 months if you've just graduated from college, or let's say you're in college and you want to do a summer internship. So that's the intern category. And then the traineeship category is 18 months if you are a young professional and it's been under 5 years since you graduated. Okay, so it's 12 or 18 months. It's actually a great way for you to live and work in the US for a short amount of time to see if this is someplace you really want to, where you want to build your business or grow your vision. Okay. So now this is the e-visa for treaty traders and investors. This is different from the $1 million green card or now it's 1.8 million. So we have a green card based on investment where you have to put in $1.8 million and generate 10 jobs. This is different. This is a visa based on treaties with the United States for trade and commerce and friendship. And so not every country has one. Now, Daniel has a slide or as like a PDF of the countries in the Eastern Europe and former Soviet Union that do have treaties with the United States. So for example, Kazakhstan has one, but Russia and Tajikistan do not. Belarus does not, but Estonia does. So we'll send that sheet. He's going to email it to you so you can have it. It tells you which countries in the region have a treaty and which do not. Let me just move to the next slide. There is a hyperlink in the slides to the list of countries that you can look. It's a long list, so it can't fit on a slide. And you can just go and check if your country is on there. Now, if your country is on there, you can apply for a visa to oversee an investment in the United States, or work for an investment in the United States, or work for a company that does a lot of trade with the United States. So again, I mentioned to you about the L. Also, I'm originally from Pakistan, and Pakistan has a treaty with the United States. And I can tell you that a lot of the towel manufacturers, textiles, rugs, rice, spices, they actually also use the e-visa to do trade. So they come in, they oversee the trade, they go back, they live in the US to make sure that all the produce and the goods they're coming back to Pakistan. So this is a great visa if you're interested in the trade of goods, but also if you want to invest in a business. Now, when I say invest in a business, I often get 3 questions. One is, well, can I just buy an apartment? Is that an investment that gives me a visa? No. They want to make sure it's an investment in a real business. Okay. So to buy an apartment in New York City, it's $1 million. That doesn't give you a visa. The other question I get is, well, what about if I have all this money and I want to play on the stock market? That's not a real and operating business. They want you to buy or, invest in a real business. So then the question becomes, well, how much money do I need to invest? That's a good question. There is no number specified by law or statute, but generally the government is used to seeing at least 100,000. Now, in today's world on the internet, I'm sure if you Google it, there's going to be people telling stories about how little they were able to invest and got away with it. It's possible. But if you want to if you want guarantee that you're probably going to get approved, you probably want to spend around $100,000. Okay. And in a business, invest it. Now, you don't have to spend all of that money if you're starting your own business. Okay. You could transfer the money into an account in the United States for your business, you have to do some spending to show the government, hey, this is a real business, but you don't have to spend all 100,000. And so I'll give you a really quick example, two examples of some clients, because I know we've got a lot of questions coming up. And we've got a lot of really big questions. Okay, so I want to make sure we have time to address these. But essentially, I'll give you an example. She's from Taiwan. We have a treaty with Taiwan, and she is interested in real estate. So she didn't buy an apartment, but she bought a assisted living building for seniors. And she has a real estate background, and she got an inheritance because when her grandmother passed away, she left her a lot of money. And so she took that inheritance amount and she bought some senior assisted living homes in Southern California. And she's going to come in and she's going to oversee them. And she has this Chinese acupuncture background that she's going to integrate into those senior assisted living programs. So that's an example. And she was granted the E visa. Okay. And so now really quickly, just some details. You apply for this visa at the consulate, you register your company at the consulate, you show them, what this investment entity is. The good news is it's actually valid indefinitely. You can just renew in 2-year increments, and the visa is for 5 years. So after the visa sticker in your passport is for 5 years. And then every time you come to the US, they let you in for 2 years, and your spouse gets work authorization. So we will often have, a married couple that are running the business together, and they both come in, and, one will be the principal, and then the spouse will get work authorization. Okay. This one's a really fun one. It's an O1 for individuals of extraordinary ability. I'm just going to tell you the criteria coming up. There are 8 criteria, and you have to show 3. One is, national or international awards in your field. Another is published material about you or your work, scholarly articles that you've written, being asked to judge the work of others in your field, membership in associations that require outstanding achievements, important and original contributions to the field, a high salary compared to others in your field, and that you've been employed in a critical role for established organization. So this is 3, you have to show 3 out of 8. And this is a great visa if you want to start your own business. And you have to show these, that you're starting your own business and you're this, expert in your field, which is why you've been able to start your own business, and you can get the O1 visa, and you can sponsor yourself for the O1. Okay. So basically, as a general rule, you have to show that you're an established expert in a particular field, and you're coming to the US to work in that field. It's employer specific, but you can sponsor yourself as the employer here. How long can you have an O? It's 3 years at first, and then renewable in 1-year increments. There's also a green card for individuals of extraordinary ability. It's basically the same criteria, but you do have to show that not only are you this expert in your field and you're going to be working in your field, but that your work is of such importance that you should stay permanently in the United States. Unfortunately, the spouses aren't allowed to work. So it just incentivizes the people on the O1 to apply for the green card based on extraordinary ability. Okay, now I'm going to kind of fly through these because I don't think anyone on this in this presentation is from Australia. If there is, just let me know, put it in the chat, and then I can talk about this. But this is a visa just for Australians. And I do want to tell you that the Irish are trying to push for a similar visa category. Okay, so there's really just 5 countries for which the US has special visas. Number 1 was the E3 visa. That's for Australians. Then there is, so this is a high-skilled visa for an Australian national. It's just like the H-1B. And the only thing is that, again, you can't You can't own the company, but if you want to be a co-founder with a minority share, you could use this. And it's valid indefinitely. You can renew every 2 years, and your spouses get work authorization, which is great. There's another one for Canadians and Mexicans. Now, this is not like the H-1B or the E-3. This is for a narrow list of occupations that are professional roles. And there's no prevailing wage requirement. You also cannot sponsor yourself for the TN. You need an employer to sponsor you. This is also valid indefinitely, but in 3-year increments. Okay. And unfortunately, here too, the spouses don't get work authorization. Okay. And then this is the H-1B one for Chileans and Singaporeans. So it's exactly like the H-1B, but it's just for Singaporeans and Chileans. There's an annual limit, and but it's never used up. So you don't even really have to go through the lottery. Okay. So that's the H-1B one. So those are the 5 countries: Australia, Singapore, Chile, Mexico, and Canada. Those are the 5 countries for which the US has special visas. Okay, I'm going to quickly tell you about the International Entrepreneur Parole Program. I see I'm running out of time. This is if you have established a company in the United States that's under 5 years old, you have your own, 10% ownership interest, and you're going to play an active and central role in the operations and business. So you can't be a passive investor. And then you have to show proof of funding. And funding, it must be at least 250,000. Let's see, the startup must have received a capital of investment of at least 250,000 from qualified US investors. So it's got to be US investors, and it can't be friends and family, right? So investors can't be relatives. Now, if you're doing something more with government in the US, if you get 100,000 in grants and awards from US federal, state, or local government, you can qualify for the International Entrepreneur Parole Program. Okay. So that's proof of funding. Parole is a little bit different from a visa category. It's a lawful entry into the United States, but it's not a visa status like F1 or O or H-1B. And there's no direct pathway to permanent residence. Probably someone who gets this would ultimately apply for a green card based on extraordinary ability or work in the national interest. Okay. All right. So that's just a little bit more about how to file, the filing fees involved, about $1,300. You don't have to be paid a certain amount, but you do. So there's like a household income requirement. And again, these slides will be shared with you. I will send them to Daniel so he can send them out to you guys, and you'll have all this information available to you. Your spouses and children under 21 may join you, and the spouse actually can work. So the spouse will get work authorization. Okay, we're almost done here. A couple more things: can't appeal the denial. And the big thing for those of you, and there is a question here, and is something like a startup visa? Yes, it's the closest thing that we have, and it is what Obama created. That's exactly right. They approved it, and this is it. I'm describing the terms, which is you need that proof of funding, and you need, started in 5 years, more than at least 10% ownership interest, etc. And the interesting thing, though, is you cannot have more than 3 foreign national entrepreneurs per startup. Okay. So if you're in a group of founders, getting together and wanting to apply for this, you can have no more than 3. Okay. So just the avenues for permanent residence, quick slide on this. There are 5 primary pathways. One is employment-based. There's a lot of subcategories here. Another is family. There are multiple subcategories here too. You could be a spouse of a U.S. citizen. You could be the brother of a U.S. citizen. You could be spouse of a green card holder. There's multiple subcategories, but not all of them can get their green card right away. The one category that can move forward with the green card right away is if you are the spouse, child, or parent of a U.S. citizen. There's also the annual green card lottery, and that is in October every year, and I highly encourage you to apply. It's, about 15 million people apply. There's no fee. You have to be from a country that is underrepresented. And what that means is you can't be from a country that there's so many foreign nationals already living in the United States from that country. So, if you're from Mexico or Canada or UK or India, Mexico, China, you cannot apply in the lottery. But every year, the State Department announces what countries are eligible, and you can apply, and then you could get a green card. So it's 50,000 green cards given per year. Now, if you are in the United States and you are afraid to go back to your home country, you could apply for asylum, but this is individualized harm. You have to show that you face harm, not just that because, right now with the humanitarian crisis in Ukraine, there are a lot of people fleeing the situation in Ukraine. It doesn't mean that while all of them deserve some kind of humanitarian protection, they could get something called temporary protected status, but they may not qualify for asylum, because asylum is really, you've been targeted because of your race or religion or political opinion. And so asylum is a little bit narrower. And then finally, the investment-based $1.8 million green card. So that is if you invest in a business in the United States, you generate 10 jobs, and you put in at least 1.8 million, then you can get a green card. There is a lower amount if you're investing money in a economically depressed area. So there it would be 900,000. Okay. So those are the ways to the green card. So the visas I described to you in the first part of the presentation, those are for temporary employment. I did explain to you how you could move to permanent residence, and those visa categories that don't really allow for a transition to a permanent residence. Okay. And then these are the ways to think about permanent residence. There's a question here: can I have a green card under entrepreneurial parole? And the answer is no. It does not lead to a green card. Okay. So then just some common obstacles to think about is if you have previously overstayed in the United States, if you've spent more than 6 months, over your visa, you're not allowed to come in for 3 years. And if you've overstayed by a year, you're not allowed to come back for 10 years. So that can be a problem. If you're someone who's spent time in the US on a J1, then you could be subject to something called a 2-year home residency requirement. So that's something that can sometimes surprise people. The other big thing is if you lie on your visa application, then you could be found, you'll be found not allowed to come in for fraud. And then finally, if you have an arrest or conviction, it'll definitely delay your visa processing, but it could also mean that you're not allowed into the country, or you can't stay in the country if you have certain arrests or convictions. The big ones are around drug offenses, and then of course anything that involves fraud. Those are the kinds of offenses that would disqualify you from entry into the United States. Okay, really quickly, I have created a podcast series. So, everybody learns in different ways. Some people really like the speaking, they like the presentations, they like to read the slides after. And then some people really like to have that podcast so they can listen to things again. And so I recorded 14 episodes. A lot of them are on by visa category. And then there's several podcast episodes that are interviews with a former immigration judge, former asylum officer, former Department of Labor lawyer, a criminal defense attorney. So I have these different interviews that could also be useful to you. And my most recent one is with someone who got his green card based on extraordinary ability. So he actually came as a student, F1, it was at Stanford. He got an O1 for an individual of extraordinary ability for his startup. He then went to work at Facebook, where he also had an O1. And then I helped him sponsor himself for a green card based on extraordinary ability. So he describes his entire journey. He describes the evidence that he put together, how he showed the government that he was someone of extraordinary ability. So that episode may be useful to you. And then this is just my contact details. I'd love to connect over LinkedIn. Like I said, Daniel will send the slides to you. But yeah, send me a LinkedIn connection so we can stay in touch. You can also send me an email if you'd like to be on my email list campaign. Every time there's an immigration development, we send out emails. Some of them may not be relevant to you because you're not in the United States yet, and some may. So, please, you can add yourself to that list and I'd be happy to help. So Daniel, do you want me to I'm going to start looking at the questions.
Yeah, I will read the questions,
Okay.
and thank you for awesome presentation. Before we
Thank
continue
you.
with the questions, we will have about 15 minutes to let Nadia to do her work. She's very busy nowadays, especially at these hard times. But before we discuss the questions, Nadia has an awesome podcast, so please subscribe to her podcast and follow her. I personally subscribe to her newsletter,
Oh,
and I find this awesome. And I mean, the information you post in there is very relevant and very helpful for us. I sometimes even share it with my close network because I mean, you guys are doing a great job, and thank you for that.
thanks.
So we have plenty of questions, and I hope we can answer all of them. Guys, use your opportunity to ask here in the chat. You can type your questions, and we'll try to pick the best ones to address, so it can help most entrepreneurs. I'll start from the beginning, and in the beginning from SV, there is a question. Um, my employer went out of business and fired me while I was on H-1B. I had 2 months to find a new job, but I couldn't. And due to a personal reason, I stayed in the country 3 months after laid off, and instead of two. And the follow-up thing is what he's saying or she's saying. What issues and options may I have? I'm considering to come back. I'm an entrepreneur. Have a U.S. company C corp.
Yeah, so I think we would have to, for you, we could look at the O1 visa. If you're someone of extraordinary ability, you can look at the criteria. I mean, if you have a US company, we'd also have to see if there's any, if it's doing anything, if there's money in the bank for it, if there's a business plan, what do you want to do with the US company, whether it could sponsor you for an O1. I don't know what your what country of nationality you hold, whether you hold multiple passports, but you could also look at the E2 investor visa if you want to use that US company to then build an investment. I would think that those are if you want to look for another H-1B employer, you may have time remaining of your 6 years that you can recapture. So those are the first few ideas that come to my head. If you want to have a detailed conversation, you can reach out, we can set up a consultation. My consultation fee is, there's a fee, it's $350, but it's an hour-long detailed conversation with you about your options.
All right. Another question from ED, Hinted. Am I right that having a company in Russia 3 years and I'm CEO at the US, created November 21st, also CEO, and they are not connected, but both have me and my co-founder as a shareholder, I'm eligible for L1?
Yes, you're absolutely right.
All right. So now we already have some immigration options. Awesome. The other one, mobile apps monetization. Can you elaborate on an opportunity for startup founders under EB-2 National Interest Waiver? What is the process, cost, how fast to enter the US, and how soon the green card?
Okay, that's a very, very big question. I don't know if I can answer that even in 15 minutes. If you are interested in the EB-2 National Interest Waiver, you're right, you don't need an employer to sponsor you. So if you have a startup and you want to sponsor yourself, your work has to be in the national interest and you have to be qualified to work in this national interest, right? And so there's criteria to show that the work is of national interest, and then there's criteria to show that you are qualified to do this work. Now, the one thing is that the processing times are very long for these petitions. They are talking about making premium processing available to these petitions. Once that petition is approved, so let's say that's taking about 12 to 18 months, then you can apply for your green card based on the approval of this, the national interest waiver. So I would say you're looking at about a 2.5 year timeline for your entry to the United States. In the meantime, unfortunately, if you're sponsoring yourself for the EB-2 and you're not in the United States, then there's really no way for you to come in and start working until you get that green card.
I see. All right. So the next question is from Explorer.
How can I sponsor myself on an O1? Yeah, I mean, basically you need to qualify for the O1. You need to meet the criteria, but you could sponsor yourself as if you create a business. You would need to show you have money in the bank to pay yourself for your work, okay? So that's an important piece of qualifying. So one part of the analysis is your eligibility or your qualifications for an O1, and then another piece is the entity that's sponsoring you, even if it's your company's ability to pay you, that they have work for you. So you would need to show all those things, that there's a reason you need to come into the United States.
All right. And you said money in the bank. Is there a minimum requirement for the salary and for the minimum amount of the bank accounts for the company?
I would probably say a few hundred, like a couple $100,000, because you're asking for a 3-year visa. And you're saying you're extraordinary, so there should, you're probably going to be paid reasonably well. And so, yeah, you probably want to plan, 150, 200, at least there's some money in the bank to say, how are you going to support yourself while you work on extraordinary ability? Now, if you don't have that much, you should certainly have a business plan and invoices and maybe client engagements saying that, okay, I don't have this much, but I've got all this business in the pipeline. It's coming. The money's coming.
Right. You partially answered the question. I think you probably answered, but I will just repeat. Maybe you have some more details. Same from Explorer about entrepreneurial parole. If you can maybe add some more details, because it sounds like this is something considered like a startup visa, and many entrepreneurs were waiting. I heard of this. This was about to be approved by the Congress, so it seems like recently it was approved. And
this is not by Congress. There is a startup visa that keeps getting proposed by Congress. That is something different. And actually, because the Obama administration got so tired of Congress never passing this into the statute, he created this little program called the International Entrepreneur Parole Program. So now during the Trump administration, they refused to follow it because they said, they said, well, because you're not letting Congress do their job and you just created this, little program, we're not going to follow it. And so during the Trump administration, they refused to follow it. And then towards the end, they said, okay, we'll follow this program, but nobody applied because people were really scared. And then the Biden administration has said, no, this program is definitely back on track. The reality is most people aren't applying under this. They are applying for the E, the L, the O, even the H. Most people, I think it's because the qualified investor piece can be hard to show.
I see. And let's probably wrap it up. Just a few minutes left. There are plenty of entrepreneurs from Eastern Europe as well watching us, and many of those entrepreneurs coming to immigrate soon just because of the refugee thing opportunity, and they're coming to Mexico, coming to the border, It's not, of course, entrepreneurial way of doing it, but is it something you recommend, or is it something you wouldn't recommend and just take and actually focus on entrepreneurial opportunity visas rather than refugee? Because many of the entrepreneurs that I know that haven't been personally impacted by the government, but they are against and they are afraid to be back. They still afraid, and definitely might have consequences, but they haven't been arrested or something. Is it something they should consider as an option as a refugee, or is just out of their scope for immigration?
I think, if they're fleeing harm in Ukraine, I mean, certainly it's faster if they have a valid visa with which to travel to, and I think for Mexico, they don't currently need, like Ukraine, you don't need a visa to, or even Russia, you don't need a visa to come to Mexico, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And then if you apply at the border, you are running a couple of risks. Number one, you could be detained. So if you seek entry at the border and you say, "Oh, I'm applying for asylum," then you could be detained. You could be denied. They could say, "Well, we don't believe you have harm," which I don't think is possible. It's all over the news what's happening in Ukraine. So I think an officer would let you in, but you would probably be detained. And that's something you have to be ready to accept. Like that can be scary. And if you're coming with your family, there's no guarantee that you'll be kept together. So that's pretty intense too. There was something called temporary protected status. I want you to be very careful, because that was for people who were Ukrainians who were in the US on March 1. So if you try to come in now, you're not going to qualify for temporary protected status. It was truly for people who were here when the war started, and it's unsafe to go back. Now, if you do go to a neighboring country like Poland or Germany, you can ask for refugee status determination in those countries, and then ask to be resettled to the United States. That is a long and slow process, but it may be a little more humane than trying to come and deal with the US border. The US border on the south side is quite inhumane, because we also have all the flows from El Salvador, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua. So, someone coming from Ukraine and is going to get just into that area, with that whole flow. So that's risky. It is a personal decision for people to make, what harm, what you're fleeing. So it could be faster in terms of getting in, but I don't think it'd be faster in terms of building a life, because you might be sitting in detention for a while. So if starting a business is real, you should look, if you want, if you can get a job. I mean, some of my clients are sponsoring folks from Ukraine for visas. So if you could find someone who will sponsor you for an employment-based visa, if you want to go to school in the US, I know that these are people, usually means you have money to go to school or, make these connections. But I would say that those are options that maybe are less painful.
I see. Well, thank you for a great talk, Nadia. I really appreciate your time, and thank you for sharing so many details on different types of visas. It definitely will be of help many entrepreneurs. I'm sure they will reach out to you. And everyone who needs contacts, it was on this video, but if you need a personal introduction to Nadia, just reach us out. We will connect you with Nadia and her team, and they will take it from there. Before we close, I would like ask everyone to press the like button. Of course, subscribe to this channel. Write your comments. Share it with other people in your network, because it can help many entrepreneurs. And it will help us to grow this channel and reach out to more people. And subscribe to Nadia's podcast and Nadia's newsletter, because you will get a lot of quality advice and news that may help you with immigration. Nadia, thank you again for your talk, and we like to close with something that you have on your mind on your heart to share with the audience, with entrepreneurs. And yeah, thank you for being a great speaker today.
Oh, thank you. So, I mean, insofar as something to share, I just want to say, Daniel, you know, you and I were at Stanford. I just want to say that it is very possible for you to take your vision for a business, you know, very far in the United States. I have clients who came as students. They met other great students with whom they have founded companies, gotten O1s, gotten green cards based on extraordinary ability, and now they're running companies, you know, with 400 employees, 800 employees. So it's very, very possible. It takes patience, it takes planning, it takes organization, it takes resources. You know, Taylor Swift, someone asked her once, I don't know if you guys know Taylor Swift, a very famous musician here. She was asked, well, what's your one piece of advice that you would give? And she said, get yourself a good lawyer. And so, you know, I would say to you too, if you are really serious about getting that right visa and getting the visa all the way to US citizenship, you probably want to partner in this. And, you know, I think a lawyer will be very helpful.
Excellent advice. That was Nadia Yakub, an
Thank
immigration
you.
lawyer. And please stay tuned with us. We'll have more talks soon. And follow us, subscribe, become a member of Google World. Nadia, please stay here. And I'm closing the session right now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.